No, what's funny is I have purposely avoided therapy for multiple reasons. I mean,
Too slow,
yeah,
especially for you.
I'm it's a little bit of that fear that I was just talking about, where I don't even know if I'm ready to unlock everything like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like another part of what you said is like I'm moving. I'm trying to go. Like I don't have time in my head. I don't have time to do it right now.
And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I totally love that about you. And it's also a good like provider alpha masculine energy, which I love too. But just remember that that grief and that loss, that disappointment is always going to wait for you. It'll wait for you to be done. It'll wait for you to go on vacation. It'll wait for when you're alone.
Yeah.
So just know that it's always going to be there.
What up? What up? Welcome to another edition of Real Talk presented by the Keyword Is podcast. This podcast is a little different from our regular podcast because what I like to do on Real Talk is take a deep dive with my guest. And sitting with me today, I have the amazing Robyn. And she is a foresight consultant. What she does, she preps and advises for catastrophic events. Some of her client list includes Hollywood elites, government officials, as well as business leaders. And we will get into some of that as we go on. Um, and one of the things that stood out to me as I was doing some of my research is she was known as the secret weapon between these companies and things like that. How's it going today?
See?
That's good. Good to hear.
Yeah. Yes,
Um,
it is.
um, so, like I said, I want to. The first thing that stood out to me was that you were known as secret weapon. So, why were you kept a secret?
Because the work that I do is very unique. And some people could label it, if they have a very tunnel vision or a very low understanding of things in science and even the gospel, they would consider it as maybe a form of witchcraft. So a lot of brands and governments, had to protect themselves from people who don't have the knowledge to understand what it is that I do. But what some of the work I did for companies and corporations behind the scenes is it is a secret weapon because if they're not using the same type of tools, it definitely gives them an upper hand. So let's just say that somebody's in litigation. Two companies are suing each other, and I'm hired on one side. I can see what they're planning. I can see who's committing fraud. I can see where their minds go, where their energy's going, what they're leaning towards, what they'll settle for, all of those things. So that gives an upper hand to anybody in a situation like that, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That
And
makes a
if
lot
people
of
and if people got word of that,
sense.
that they were using people like us, then it's just very controversial and it shouldn't be. I mean, the scriptures talk about people like myself and Um, people from the beginning of time, rulers and kings, have always used some type of spiritual advisor. It's whether they were seeking it out of truth and light versus, something kind of dark or manipulation. That's the
Mm.
difference.
So you think so before you think they were using spiritual advisors in a dark way rather than just kind of trying to see what's the problem maybe within the company or organization?
Well, I think there's always, I always call it a good manipulation and a bad manipulation, or what people would call dark and evil, right? I think people use gifts in right ways and have good sources, and I think some people use it with unclean sources and don't fully get the full picture of the beauty and of the light of things. So it could go either way.
Yeah. So now I have to ask, if you're at liberty, who are some of your clients?
Well, I never name drop,
Okay.
but some of them are very well known, corporations, companies that you guys use every single day. I've helped some government officials get elected. I've helped in Supreme Court cases, murder cases, um, things that are pretty well known, but also a lot of people behind the scenes. A lot of private organizations that want to prepare for catastrophic events in the future, to people that are just using it for energy work in their companies. I'm also a healer. So I have the gift of healing where I can heal things, but I do have the gift where I can see things from the past, current, and future. And my specialty is in quantum physics. So I have a lot of unique skill sets. So it's not one or the other or one specialty. I can work on an animal to a family to a corporation or a whole government. And so it just depends. But I never name drop, and I do that for many, many reasons. I feel like too often people name drop to give themselves more credibility
Mm.
instead of standing on their own track records, their own characteristics, their own morals. And actually, when I go to big events and people are name dropping, it tends to be like a red flag for me. I just don't like it because they name drop thinking like it's going to make them more acceptable or liked more, and it's not. And so it's just something that I don't do.
Yeah. Just stand on your own kind of
Hmm.
work and everything like that.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in there, you mentioned that your specialty was quantum physics,
Mm.
which is something that, how can I put it? I don't have the most knowledge of, but I'm very interested in it. And when I hear about it, I try to understand. I try to understand,
It's
but
probably the wrong person explaining it.
maybe so, because I hear a lot of Neil deGrasse. He explains it and he thinks he's breaking it down. The videos I watch, he's trying to break it down. I'm like, it's still
Yeah.
so kind of give me
Well,
a
I
little.
I can explain quantum physics in a very, very easy way in a
Okay,
lot of different categories too. So we can talk about that all day long if you like.
I would like a little breakdown.
Okay. What part of quantum? How about I explain how manifesting works in the
Yes.
quantum field? And this will kind of get people to understand things like, okay, so people are always trying to manifest things. And manifesting can also be labeled as praying, praying for things. And really, you can amplify manifesting if you're praying also.
Hmm.
So here's how it works. If I am praying or meditating and I'm hyper focused on something I really want, let's just say I want a new house, okay? And I'm starting to think about the details of that house, what it would look like, what type of size, what color is it, those types of things. What happens in the quantum field? Now, in the quantum field, everything exists and they're wave particles. Kind of like think of dust, just a bunch of dust, okay? This is where the scriptures talk about matter, that matter already existed. It was just unorganized. So wave particles, dust are just floating around, no organization to them. Well, they're electrical fields, is what they are. So think of them as like little electrical pulses as dust. So when I start to think about something, and if I hold that thought for more than 16 seconds, what happens is those particles that are floating around start to vibrate because they align to my frequency. They align to my thoughts because thoughts could actually go about 12 feet. The energy field of the brain goes about 12 feet in the air around us. Okay, so it starts to attract different dust. Think of it that way.
Okay.
And so those wave particles start to build momentum and then they get faster and faster and faster. And then other wave particles are like, "Hey, I like that. I like your vibe." And then they start to build. And then they build so much momentum that they're vibrating together, they become solid. So when you have a solid, that is when you plant a seed in the quantum field. Now, what do you do when you plant a seed? You nurture it, give it
Mm.
sunshine, you give it love, you give it water, all those good things, right? So it's in the quantum field, you planted a seed. So tomorrow, another 16 seconds thinking about it, praying about it, all those things. And then what happens is that seed starts to sprout. This is string theory. So that string starts to sprout because it's a seed. And once it grows, it goes into the physical dimension. So that's how you go from energetic or mental in the quantum field into the physical reality. It just takes time to plant the seed to organize the momentum and then have a physical manifestation of that. People just don't give it enough time and they're not specific enough.
Mm.
Now, when those things take place, that's how you're creating something into a string where this is connected to that. Okay, so that's kind of like string theory. Now, quantum entanglement is where it gets even more interesting. So let's just say that Robyn and Jenny are next to each other. If we're next to each other for more than 16 to 20 minutes, depending on our energetic fields, what happens? Same thing. We start to vibrate. Our energetic fields start to vibrate. And then we start to build so much momentum that we speed up. And then my momentum and her momentum start to spin. And so what happens is we now are recalibrating each other. And then when we're done, when I have a piece of her, she has a piece of me, we stop. Quantum entanglement. Now, what happens is we have recalibrated each other. So, this is why they say if you want to be a millionaire, you hang out with millionaires.
Mm.
If you want to be this, hang out with that. You are what you eat because everything's quantum entangling with us all the time. If it's more than 16 to 20 minutes, right? This is why women align their menstrual cycles together all the time. So men who have daughters and wives, like they know that all of them, all the females are on periods at the same time. How does that come to be? Coaches of women's teams, same thing. They're all in the same cycle because they're quantum entangling. Now, why that's cool is because whatever it is that you're wanting, like if you want to be a certain type of person, spiritual, if you want spiritual gifts, hang out with someone who's spiritually gifted because you'll just keep recalibrating. You're borrowing parts of their energy field and then it's becoming yours. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use that. Now, for me, those are just basic understandings of how stuff like that works. And it's also quantum physics is a way for people, really smart people, to know how God works. And it starts to understand how these systems are put into place, how we can use it, how we can amplify things, why certain things just don't work. So for my clients, I can test and see in the quantum field where things are dropping off. Why are they not sprouting? Why is that string from the energetic side to the physical side being blocked? So there's a lot of different things, but that's just kind of a basic understanding of how that works.
Okay, and that's a good breakdown because so now my question is when you're working with your clients, are you seeing things like people that they're with or like habits that they have, things like that? That's like
What do you mean by people that they're with?
people
Like
that they're
physically or spiritually?
people that they're around, that they're surrounding themselves with. Like if they want something, but they're hanging with people who aren't kind of giving them
So
what they
I
need.
I go a lot more in depth than that.
Okay. Okay.
So for instance, if somebody booked a call with me, they're not allowed to tell me anything. They're not allowed to like there's no survey, there's no questionnaire, there's nothing. All I have is your name and your number. That's it. I call you, I give you the breakdown. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be talking about a bunch of woo woo bullshit. I'm not going to talk about spirit guides and past lives, and I'm not going to do tarot cards and anything like that. I said, I'm going to be hyper focused on what's getting in the way of your potential. What needs to be healed in you? Where did you get dammed up? And so, what is that block? And so, what I'll do as soon as all they have to tell me is I have permission and their name. Their name gives me the hyper focus. So it's like me going right into the quantum field, and that's their fingerprint for me. So then I can see everything. I can see what's going on in their mind, what kind of phrases they've repeated thousands of times. When did it start? So, like, if they have cancer, I could say, hey, okay, this is the kind of cancer they have. Why? When did it start? When did the actual thought occur? Usually it's 20 years prior,
Mm.
and they decided they didn't want to do this shit anymore because they were betrayed or something happened. And so I go in their timeline, just like in the quantum field, I trace all of those wave particles. And so what I do is I go through and I say, okay, this time at this time, this is what you were thinking. And then they're like, oh my God, you're exactly right. So it's not just about who they're hanging around. It's why are they looking at the world this way? When did they decide this is how it's going to be? This is how the world is. This is who I am. That's the moment where people get blocked and they get dammed up. And so that's what I do is I remove that and then reset them to the origins of when they were in their full optimization. And then I can just keep going and just create even more momentum and power in them. But that's just what I could do for an
That's
individual. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like something that you really have to be ready for. Not you, because I assume. I mean, your track record shows that you've done it a while at a high level. I'm talking about the individual who has to accept you kind of diving into their brain and see what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
That can get tough. Like,
Well, I'm going to tell you that I am such a loving and neutral person that I would say 98% of my clients have become best friends with me. And I have a lot of clients, but they honestly feel like out of anybody in the whole entire world, they could tell me anything and I would love on it. And I will find a way for us to giggle and just love on it. Everybody thinks like, oh my gosh, if anybody ever really knew those thoughts, if anybody really knew who I was when nobody was looking, or what they're watching, or whatever it is. I mean, we all have that stuff and nobody can really confide. So before I dive into those types of things, I've already built such rapport. I'm never going to just go and go right into something that I know like I need to build up with you. So, and I also know how to word things. I always know who I'm talking to. So I'm
mhm.
not going to, freak someone out or say something negative or anything. Everything is coming with just such neutral, loving energy that, I mean, I have so many sessions, like you can find them on TikTok. People post them sometimes, like a woman who got raped who thought about her rapist every single day, of how she wanted to beat him with a bat and she wanted to really put harm to him. And after our session, this is what she said, and she didn't even realize it. She said, I hope he's doing better now. Like that's the kind of switch. So there's nothing that I've ever faced where people are like, damn, I can't believe you just brought that up or, freaked him out or anything like that. It's a very beautiful thing when you start to figure out and have answers
Mhm.
about why you are, why you're behaving this way, why you're thinking this way, why this keeps happening in relationships. It just makes so much sense. So it's like freeing people up.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be ready one day. I don't know when. I'll be ready for my deep dive one day. Um, uh, Also, I wanted to ask because as I was surfing your socials a little bit, I saw something interesting that you talked about. Everything is like a reflection, like in your life. The example you gave, I don't know if it was real or if it was just an example about little girl being bullied, and it was kind of like she had to look at herself, like who is she bullying or who is she, even if it's herself, which was,
Yeah.
I mean, that was mind blowing to me. But I went to the comments. It seemed like people didn't get to that part of the video or something, because they were like, "If my kid's being bullied, you telling me that means they're just being a bully?" But they didn't see the even to themselves. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
And people have a really hard time like thinking it on a bigger scale, looking behind the scenes of things. Um, but yeah, like if whatever we're complaining about or whatever we're encountering often, like if I go outside and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it today? Like every asshole's out all at the same time. crazy drivers all day long, things like that. It's because it's a reflection of me. So if my daughter comes home from school and says all the girls are so rude and so nasty, it's because there's a part of her that's rude and nasty. It's that defense thing. It's kind of like how you hear people who accuse you of things or the things they're actually doing. It's the same thing. And so we have to watch that. Things that are happening to me are always, and you could label it as karma too, in a sense.
Mm,
Like if I cheat, somebody's going to cheat on me. If I lie, somebody's going to lie to me. If I steal, I'm going to be stolen from. It's all of those things. So it's a reflection. But people where you're talking about is where people, they're like, I'm a good person. I don't treat people like that. I don't do any of that stuff. Well, what are you doing to yourself? What are you saying in your mind to yourself? Are you looking in the mirror and going, oh my gosh, you're so fat. Your face is ugly. Nobody likes you. And you don't even know you're doing it. It could be a subconscious belief. So you're bullying yourself. So
mm,
you're then putting that wave particles or aligning to that. And then the other wave particles have to align to that too. So they're attracting other ones outside.
mm.
So that's what people don't get, that it's always a reflection of you.
So it's always coming back to you in
Hmm.
some way. That's interesting.
Well, it also gives you a lot of power. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
Because once you realize how powerful you really are and your responsibility into things, then you're like, damn, that means I could change anything overnight, pretty much. That's what people don't get.
You know, my mindset on that was similar, but more just not even I've never looked at it that deep. Mine is always like you can control everything. If you mess up your life, it's your fault. Like that's just always been how I
Yeah,
process things just in
it's
everyday
very
life.
masculine of you.
Yeah, like I'm just like,
I
nah,
love that. No,
whatever you do, it's on you. Figure it out. Like that's just always been how I thought about things because me being like you said, I'm a man and I have a wife and 4 kids. I don't even have time to get down on myself. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
if there's a time where I feel like everything's crashing down, I'm like, why? Because me, it's my fault. Do something. Like, and that's just always how I've even thought about everything. Even in times when I'm like, I should take a minute to whatever, like feel it. I'm like, nah, don't feel it. Keep going.
mm.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It
That's
gets
that's good in a lot of ways, but here's the thing. Sometimes when we don't feel it and we use it for fuel, that's great. But there will come a time where you have to feel it. It'll
yes,
always wait for you. It'll always wait for you. And it could be 20 years later, and all of a sudden you're starting to process all that stuff, all the letdown, the disappointment, all that stuff. Well, it will show up.
yeah. And mine usually, I won't say usually, but the times that it has shown up to me have
Mhm.
been a moment when I'm by myself and now I'm crying. What's going on? Like, why am I getting hit with everything? Like that has
That's
happened to
good.
me. I can't say multiple times, but it's happened to me a couple times where I'm just like, oh,
Just
now
hits
I'm
you.
thinking now, yeah, like yeah,
Well, let me tell you something about that, because a lot of men in general, but even women nowadays, are fighting that urge to release, that urge to cry. But a lot of people don't know that each tear underneath a microscope is like a snowflake, and none of them are identical. And what's interesting is they tested the frequencies of those snowflakes, of those tears, and they all had toxic frequencies to them. So when we fight the urge to cry, we are saying, no, I want to hang on to this toxic energy.
mm,
Because that's what it is when you cry, it's releasing toxins from the body, from the mind. Think of it that way. We're like, no, 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 I can't do that. I'm going to hang on to it. So if
yeah,
we really understood what the body and the mind were trying to do when we cried, we would probably really try to dive into it when those urges took place.
yeah. Get those toxins out. Your body trying to let it, and you want your
Mhm.
mind won't allow you to let it out. Man, yeah. I mean, It's not. That doesn't sound ridiculous at all. It makes a lot of sense because you feel better afterwards.
Absolutely.
You find
Always.
a
Yeah.
better
I used to always go cry in the shower so nobody would know.
habit.
Yeah.
um, so in there, I kind of picked out a point where you said when you learn about quantum physics and you learn about a lot of that you were saying in there, you learn how God works.
Mhm.
Explain that just a little bit.
Okay. Well, I think that, first of all, people should always be looking for upgrades in their belief systems. Typically we are raised in a certain type of manner of what we believe God to be. And as a child learning that, we have our own image in our mind of what that looks like. Okay. Now, we might have changed some of our religious doctrine through the years, maybe what church we go to or what scriptures we're reading, things like that, or but we haven't really changed our subconscious belief of what God looks like or how God works. So most typically everybody is thinking about God as like this floating wizard in the sky with this all-seeing eye spying on you. He knows everything.
Mhm.
And that is a kid-like version of God. But really, there's a delegation process happening. That's why the quantum field works the way that it does. And there's a lot of co-creating with everything. And then there's a system in place to allow things to take place. That's why we have negative and positive ions and things like that. And so if people understood that our will is God's will, it's not, we're trying to figure out what God's will is because he's not a manipulator. And that would be manipulating the quantum field. So whatever my will is becomes his will. And so that's that quantum entanglement. And we become co-creators together as a team. And so if people really understood how God became God and things like that, they would fully understand the big spell, like the big spectrum of how all of that works. But that could be like a very deep discussion and a very long one. But happy to have it though.
Yeah, I just wanted to uh basically just kind of get the basic idea of when you said that's how you learn how God works, because kind of like you said, as I've gone through life, my idea of God and religion and everything have, I can't say it's changed because I've got the basic of how I feel about everything, but the more I learn, I'm like the ideas in my head kind of like develop like of what I think everything is. And I still don't know. And I don't think I'm going to know. I don't think it's really, I don't know if it's even meant for me to know. I just kind of, I try to live right, I guess. Like I try to live right, you know, when things come into my head, I know what's right and what's wrong. And that's just kind of how I try to live.
And that's a very human way of going back to kind of that religious baggage
Mm.
of saying, like there's some check boxes, and at the end of the day, which is what we call judgment day, at the end of the day, the scale is going to be like this. And that's an upgraded that you need to upgrade that kind of belief because that kind of stuff will always make you fall short in some way.
Mm.
Because even though you're doing good things, could you have done better?
Mm.
And that type of thinking is where we get self-sabotaged. And we also limit what we can receive with that type of thinking.
Okay. As in, like what? When you say you limit what you can receive.
Because let's just say, I'll give you some examples. If somebody just watched some porn, let's just say,
Mm.
okay, which is a majority of the human race has seen porn at some point, right? So let's just say that somebody does, and then something happens right after where they need to pray to God. They're like, oh shit, God knows I just watched porn. So they show up in that space, they're needing help, they're needing a blessing. It's maybe something emergency just happened and they feel unworthy. Doesn't matter all those good deeds we talked about, right? The scale, because you know that one thing I did. And somehow that's going to limit what I'm able to receive by what I'm willing to believe I'm worthy for.
Mm.
And another thing is that people have been taught that their worthiness is contingent on what we do here in this world. And that's not true. Our worthiness was contingent on who we were before we even got here.
Oh, okay.
So the
All right.
reality is there is nothing you can do to screw that up. Nothing. And just that one little piece of information, if people really knew that that was true, think about how much more they would ask for, seek, and receive.
So, okay. Okay. So a lot of people are living now trying to be worthy, but it's already written.
Well, it goes a lot deeper than that, but um, when we are trying to have check boxes that make us worthy, the problem is even if you are, you're never going to feel worthy enough. It's a catch 22. And I see it all the time, all the time. I was a gospel teacher for, 15 years, and most of my clients are pretty religious. And I see some of the most amazing, beautiful spirits. And they do so much service and so much work. And deep down, they never feel worthy enough, ever. It's a subconscious thing, and it really limits. And another thing is Christianity and religion as a whole around the world has taught people to be grateful for what they have. Don't complain, count your blessings, and just be, because it could always be worse, you know? And so that kind of makes everybody very complacent. Like they shouldn't keep asking, or trying to manifest or trying to pray for things because they should be grateful for what they have. Only ask for the things you really need. You see that kind of mindset again? Like it's very limiting. Like in all reality, if I want to be a pilot and a doctor, I can. If I want to travel the world and make millions of dollars while I'm living on the beach, I can. It's what do I believe that I'm capable of or worthy to ask for, whether it's in my mind or a prayer, it doesn't matter, right? So all of those things create limitations in the mind.
You are speaking right now. I'm just letting you know that. Um, okay. Are you a public speaker at all?
I am, yes. I love to I can speak about a lot of different subjects, but I love to talk about doing energy work in companies. That's one of my favorite things. But when I used to prepare governments for catastrophic events in the future, I'd have to do a lot of like debriefings and talk about stuff like that in public, which is not the nicest form of motivational speaking.
Yeah.
It's like, as soon as Robin walks in the room, it's like they call me the doom and gloom girl. And so that's why I try not to do that type of work so much, or
Yeah.
I focus on the miracles more than anything. But yes.
Okay. Now, as far as the catastrophic events, are do you know my next question?
Go for it.
Okay. What catastrophic events have you predicted or seen before they happen?
Oh, okay. Well, how I kind of got some traction, how it really started for me, like on a bigger scale. I was always doing that since I was young, but like when it comes to actual social proof, it was the earthquake in Japan, the big one that where the tsunami hit
Mhm.
and caused that major just well, I was working on building survival communities with some really big boys in the industry, and I knew that something was going to happen in the region. I didn't know all the details because I didn't have enough time to, because usually I'll get a vision and then I pray and ponder and then get confirmation. And I didn't have enough time for that. So, what I did though is I positioned my partners and their company to be safe and to save lives within 3 days of that earthquake before it happened. And it was so significant that CNN got word of it and they wanted to know how they were positioned before the earthquake. And they said because of Robin Peterson. So that's kind of where that started to happen. Now, I get it with all kinds of things, things that I don't mention because it's small compared to someone else, but it's not small to me. But before COVID happened, saw that about 2 weeks before. And with COVID, what was very interesting that a lot of people didn't pay attention to is I said, there's going to be a small earthquake in Utah, and then something is going to happen to the whole entire world. And so sometimes I didn't know like exactly. I just saw it affecting and shutting down the whole entire world. But the earthquake happened first. And so that's how I get dominoes, I get cues,
Mm.
is kind of how that works. So I sent out a message to all my students and clients. And I said, hey, we're about to have a smaller earthquake in Utah, like a medium. Um, and then something's going to shut down the whole entire world. And they were like, no, Robyn, it's not time. We're not
Oh,
feeling that. Like they all argued with me.
that
I'm
was
like,
a
okay.
response. Oh my goodness! If I heard that, I don't know if that's my response. Now I don't know if I lean into it and seek shelter and get canned goods, but I'm going. It's going to be in the back of my mind. Like if I hear that,
Yeah. And
like
there's a lot of things that you can do. And I'm a firearm and survival instructor and emergency medicine. I'm a sniper. I mean, I have so much different training. So when I'm advising my clients, I advise them on a big scale. So I'm not just talking about a bunch of woo-woo stuff. I'm like, this is what you need and this is what we're gonna get. So, and here's some training. So there's a lot of different things. But when that happened, so it was a 6.9 earthquake
mm,
in Salt Lake. So if you guys can all reference that. So it was a 6.9 reference. I screenshotted all my conversations before this happened, and I even posted it on Facebook. And and then sure enough, that earthquake happened in Utah. It was 6.9, and then COVID happened about 2 weeks later,
man.
and everything shut down.
So what we can't skate past is you being a sniper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So did you did you decide to do that based on just trying to be prepared, or like what made you say I'm
Yeah.
going to be a sniper?
Yeah. Couple things. So everything that I would see in the future, if I had fear about it, I would train for it.
Okay.
I have 5 children, and as a woman, we can't depend on our men all the time. And I always just wanted to be independent, but I also wanted to have skill sets. And I was also working with high level governments and training people. So if I'm advising them on this type of event, then I need to know about the training too. I need to know what it looks like, what it feels like, how they're going to go through this training. So I've been through a lot of different training on the private side, from tactical to urban to long range to sniper craft to all of it, and different types of survival stuff. That's just my jam. I love that. Um, and I'm really good at it too. So
So
I like it, but yes, that's what started it is I wanted to be prepared myself and
so you
advise good too.
you're prepared for the if it all goes down and you have to be somewhere figuring things out alone.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Well, look, I think I got everything answered that I had for you. Um, yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to come speak with me.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
How does all of this make you feel? Like, what's your opinion about it?
About everything that you do,
Yeah,
I
you can be
feel like
honest. Go for it.
yeah, I've spoken with I don't know the title to give it, but I've spoken with someone who has some spiritual not is it powers? I don't want to say powers. Is it powers?
Just
She
a spiritual gift. Yeah.
yeah, yes, with spiritual gifts. I've spoken with someone before, and it's something that I can't say I'm going to ever lean into, but I'm interested. But it's a little bit. I'm a little bit scared of it
Sure.
because I'm kind of afraid of my own mind. I'm afraid of the what I feel are the dark parts of my mind. That's what I'll say.
Mm.
So it's like I really applaud y'all because I don't think I could handle it. But when it comes to figuring out how the mind works and why is my life is a certain way because what I think this way, why? That's the kind of things that I'm always interested in. And that's why when I'm reading your bio and I'm, researching everything, I'm like, I have to speak to her. So basically, in a nutshell, I applaud you for what you do, but I don't think I could ever do it. Or I don't
Here's the
think
thing. Everybody has a spiritual gift.
okay.
Everybody. And they probably have multiple. And that's part of our DNA and our genealogy with God. And I think a lot of people think of Hollywood when it comes to spiritual gifts. Like there's going to turn on and it's going to be overwhelming in some way. And that's never going to be the case. But I also think that a lot of people have been taught that we're all so easily deceived. And that's not true either. So we worry about that darkness or those places in our minds because those are things that we've been taught. But in all reality, it's actually hard for people to be deceived. You would have to be like a drug addict, an alcoholic every single day, or have a brain injury, a severe mental illness for you to be deceived, especially if you're somebody who likes growth and light and truth. And so I think that's why a lot of people, we know about spiritual gifts, the scriptures talk about it. But once somebody has one, it's like, whoa, it's cool, bro, but I don't want no part of that because, that could be easily deceived, right? And I think that's a very common thing. And that's also another reason why companies would say I was a secret weapon because they also didn't want to talk about it. But I think the difference is that people can discern what is of truth and light. They can feel it in their hearts and their minds that this is good. And there could be an oracle or a psychic or a medium out there that you just don't feel right about. That's true. Trust that instinct. But then there are other people that you just know that there's a different kind of connection with God or a different kind of spirit about them. And you should listen to that too. So I think that people, if they just kind of look into that and even prayed about their own gifts, what do they have? Guys call it gut instinct,
Yeah.
right? Well, what is it in your gut instinct? How can you use it more with God? How can you use it with the spirit? How can you be led by it? That's a spiritual gift, So just we're just putting these different labels on things and then creating kind of, a negative fear about them in some way, shape, or form. And there doesn't need to be. Makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I think mine is more my thoughts are more like about myself. Like
Of of course they are. They're always about ourselves.
I feel like if I ever got like let's say I because I went on your website too. So if I got one of your services, I don't know what might get pulled out. Like I don't know. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm ready.
Well, I think that people come to me typically when they're in a place where they feel stuck
Okay.
and they feel like, I'm hitting my head against the wall. I've been doing a lot of things. I'm trying in so many different categories and nothing seems to be working or I can't get to this higher place of myself. And that's typically when people will reach out to me is when they're at their wits' end. So,
Okay.
or they need healing of some kind. But just so you know, someone like me, like I just have your back, period. That's all, you know, like that connection when I hyper focus on someone, we have such a strong connection that you feel it. And the things that I would say to you would be beautiful and powerful. And you would leave that feeling empowered. You would feel like, God dang, like I feel so much lighter because just you saying that to me alone of being worried about, you know, what's she gonna see or what's she gonna say and what's gonna be pulled, like that's a fear in you. And you should really think about that because what you're thinking about is not nearly as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, see, because my thing is like I'm very like strong willed to the point like the reason I say worried about what's there is because I put a lot of stuff in the back of my mind and I'm full speed ahead. Like I'm not even worried about that. Worry about it later. Keep going. Oh, what's that problem? Put it. Worry about it later. Like I'm just keep on moving. And I'm like, if I stop, I feel like if I stop and look and open that door, it's gonna
Hmm.
be so many things that I may have either ignored or just like said whatever and just kept
So you
moving.
think it's gonna slow you down?
Yes,
Yeah. You
yeah,
think it's gonna slow you down and that you're gonna have to deal with it then, and you have too much to do.
yes, yes,
Okay.
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I understand that type of thinking, and but I want you to think of it this way. You're like a Ferrari, you personally, not everybody. And let's just say you spent over $1 million on that Ferrari, and you've been doing all this work and you've just been going gung ho, but you've only been able to put that Ferrari in third gear.
Hmm.
And you, my friend, you've done a lot. You've accomplished a lot in third gear. But what would you do if you were in fourth, fifth, or sixth? So that's the difference.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yes, you might have to take a couple days to ponder and maybe cry or let something go. Who cares? If that gets you to fourth, fifth, and sixth gear, it's kind of worth it, don't you think?
Yeah.
But I think people are thinking of like therapy where it takes a year or two. What a therapist can do in 5 years, I can do in probably an hour.
Hmm.
I know that's a bold statement, but that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that's that is that is a bold statement. And you know what's funny is I have purposely avoided therapy for multiple reasons. I mean,
It's too slow,
yeah,
especially for you.
I'm like it's a little bit of that fear that I was just talking about where I don't even know if I'm ready to unlock everything like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like another part of what you said is like I'm moving. I'm trying to go. Like I don't have time in my head. I don't have time to do it right
And
now.
I think that that's a beautiful thing. I totally love that about you. And it's also a good like provider alpha masculine energy, which I love too. But just remember that that grief and that loss, that disappointment is always going to wait for you. It'll wait for you to be done. It'll wait for you to go on vacation. It'll wait for when you're alone.
Yeah.
So just know that it's always going to be there, waiting. And that's
Yeah.
for everybody, you know, like even myself. I'm biased with myself. So, my gifts work great for everybody else, but they don't work that necessarily great for me because I'm biased. I have too much information.
Mm.
So I have to deal with my own shit too. I have to work on myself all the time, all the time. So it's all good either way. I just wanted to see what you would tell me about your thoughts about the whole thing. But
Yeah,
for you or anybody else, anything I can help with, you guys just reach out to me.
for sure. Yeah. Cause yeah, that what you could do in an hour over what a therapist can do, yeah, that's some powerful stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, when you find the source of something, like if we all went to the doctor and if we had cancer, wouldn't it be nice if they told us why the cancer started to begin with
Yeah.
and where was the root of it? What was the source of it? Because if we could remove the source, that's where everything heals. And so that's why I said I find the origin of the source, I reset them. So that's the difference. That's why it's so fast because we're not scooting around a bunch of symptoms or, how you're behaving. It's like, let me find the root of that. And then once that root's removed, everything else is in flow. It's beautiful, fast, easy. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but it's really just science.
I mean, listen, when you're saying there's not often where um, someone will say something and I'm just like I always have a question or a response, but I'm just listening to what you're saying, and I mean, it's
Let me
like I
ask you something. Do you know as a Christian, what it means to be damned?
not exactly. I mean, I think I know, but
Well, what do you
is it
think?
like
I mean, if I
is
asked
it,
a majority of any kind of person, if I said, what does it mean to be damned?
yeah, is it like doomed kind of like
Yeah, that's
like
what a lot of people think, right? Like, condemned, right?
yeah,
But back then in the scriptures, everything was very metaphorical, and they were farmers and they understood water rights. But the scriptures talk about people being damned all the time, and a lot of Christians talk about or thinking that it means they were condemned to go to hell. They're screwed, basically. Okay. But it wasn't. It was talking about water rights. So I want you to think of it this way. When a person is born, they're like a powerful raging river. And a powerful river can carve the earth. It can expand. It can go one drop of water in that river could go probably all around the world at some point. It's beautiful, but it also could be destructive, right? But it has power. It's always flowing forward. But even a powerful raging river can be dammed up. Whether it was man-made or natural doesn't really matter, right? But if a lightning hit a tree and it falls into that river, that's the beginning of that block. That's the beginning of that dam. Now it can still move forward, but it might not be as powerful as it once was, or it could be diverted. Now, what's interesting about that initial part of that dam is all the debris coming down the river is now being wedged against it. It's being caught up. That's what's created the dam. Not that people were screwed or condemned, they became blocked, dammed up. This is why you see, people in their 60s, 50s, whatever, and they're still behaving the way they were when they're 15, 16. And people go, oh, they're never going to change. They're still dressing the same. They listen to the same music, do their hair the same everything. It's because they're dammed up way back there. So it's not that people are screwed, but what I do is I go and find that original log that fell into the river so that I can remove all that and then all the stuff can just flow down again. So that's the difference is everybody's always thinking like, oh, this is bad or whatever. I'm like, I don't give a shit if it's bad. Let's just get it out of there,
yeah, okay,
right? Let's get back in the flow. Let's become powerful. And, if Christians would start looking at it that way too, they would understand versus putting, judgment of something being bad. And really, we're just dammed up a little bit. It's no big deal.
yeah, and you go find it.
Yes. Yes. Me and God together.
Well, that's a gift.
Yes. I'm very grateful for it.
Well, I think we had an amazing talk. That was really great. I think we got more than I expected. Actually, I had some things, but we got into more than I was actually expecting. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you for getting a little personal too. I know you didn't want to, but you did a little bit, and that's good. I'm glad you did. Thank
I,
you.
I try to, I try to be a little vulnerable because that's the whole point of having real talk. You know what I mean? It's a little more than just an interview Q&A. I try to get some talk going. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I appreciate you as well because I
It's
mean,
good.
you got personal, but I guess that's kind of what you have to do anyway with what you do.
I'm an open book, so I'm always I like to I don't like small talk. I'm like, let's get in there. Let's What are you really doing? What are you crying about at night, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
But
thank
thank
you.
you. It's been a pleasure.
All right.